Hi everyone, I'm Alina and I'm the founder of Teen Med Spot.
Hi, I'm Selmina and I'm the co-director of Team MedSpot.
And welcome to our channel. Teen Med Spot is a student-led nonprofit dedicated to spreading awareness about rare and under-discussed diseases by sharing educational resources and real patient stories.
Today, we're excited to be joined by someone living with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome who has generously agreed to share their personal experiences with us.
Our goal is to help people better understand what Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is, how it impacts daily life, and what we can all do to create a more informed and supportive community.
We'd like to thank our guests for taking the time to be here and willing to share their story.
With that, let's get started, and thank you all so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Nicole Chuba. I am 33 years old and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she's running around here somewhere, but I have a little biche poo. I am an aunt to a little 9-pound adorable poodle. And some of my hobbies include yoga. I should say that with a little caveat. I'm certified to teach yoga, but because of my hypermobility, I practice it in a much, much different way. I love being outdoors, fishing, going for walks, things like that. I'm super close with my family. I'm really lucky. My sister's my best friend. A little bit about me and my hobbies.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
So, for those who may not be familiar, what is Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome?
So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a genetic connective tissue disorder, and there are 13 different types of EDS. Hypermobile is the most common type of EDS, and that's what I have. Many people think that hypermobile EDS focuses mostly on your joint instability or dislocations, but it's actually much more than that.
Yeah.
Because the connective tissues found throughout your entire body, it can affect our muscles, our blood vessels, even our organs, because whenever our connective tissue is weaker and lax, things can shift and move out of place. So it's much more than hypermobility alone. And something that's really important to note with this is there are common comorbidities associated with hypermobile EDS, and those are POTS and mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS. And with those, I found that many women actually are diagnosed with POTS prior to their HEDS diagnosis. It's something that is just more commonly diagnosed, especially in young women. So for some people, that's kind of the tip off and the beginning of the journey, and it definitely was for me.
Thank you, that's great to know.
Yeah, I didn't know that it could come with pots and all those other different.
Me neither.
Yeah, that's.
And I found so many in talking to so many different women and clients that I've had through the years that was the first sign of it for so many women.
Right.
And one thing that is a little interesting to note on POTS, tilt table test is one of the most common ways to be diagnosed with POTS. And for anyone that is questioning hypermobile EDS or mast cell activation syndrome, sometimes during a tilt table test for POTS, they can administer medication to help mimic a POTS response. And if you have HEDS and mast cell, you can have a reaction to that medication, which happened to me.
Okay.
So it's something that I've heard women have gone through and is not uncommon. So just something to be mindful of.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. But there are multiple types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So could you explain which type you have and what that means? I feel like you already explained this a little bit, just a little bit more in depth.
So I do have the hypermobile EDS, which is the most common type. And I like to say this because EDS is a rare genetic disease. However, hypermobile EDS is not necessarily that rare as uncommon, because it is the most common type of those 13 different subtypes.
Right.
And so for me, it's meant a lot of different things. It is a condition that honestly affects every part of your body, and we talked a little bit about this, but whenever I don't want to get too ahead, I think there's a question later about your day-to-day, but it does affect your day-to-day things like, washing the dishes or going for a walk, unloading the dishwasher. Very common activities. You can feel fatigue, you can have less energy, more body pain.
When did you first start noticing symptoms of EDS, and what was your journey like?
Whenever I was a kid, this was probably in middle school, I actually would play soccer and I would make a fist and my hip would pop out of place and I'd knock my hip into place. And I just thought that was, I don't know, an odd quirk I had. Digestive issues were the next big thing. They told me IBS for years. I ended up having a bunch of allergies. A gluten allergy is a common thing that you will have with hypermobile EDS, but on top of that, the mast cell activation syndrome is an intolerance, basically, or you have an increase of histamine in your body, or your body attacks things that it shouldn't in an allergic type reaction way. That was something that I was really confused about when I was younger, that always was labeled as IBS, and it was mast cell activation syndrome. We just didn't realize it at the time. Those were the earlier signs. Whenever I got closer to college age, I was passing out in class. That's whenever POTS started to move into play. And I've always been flexible. I've always been oddly hypermobile. But I don't know at the time how many years ago, like, girls would dance and they would move in these bendy positions, and I just thought that was normal.
Yeah.
So the signs were always there, especially when I was younger. But when you start to look back and you put all the pieces together, you realize, wow, there was always something going on. It just didn't manifest itself until I was a bit older.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we know symptoms can vary from person to person. So thank you for sharing how yours looked like.
Yeah. And so, what are some of the biggest challenges you personally face living with EDS?
One would be advocating, and we'll speak a little bit on that later, because I know that is one of your questions, a little bit about doctors. But advocating in the clinical sense, but also advocating for myself, even with friends, family, things like that. I am lucky I have a good circle now that supports me, but it's a small circle.
Yeah.
I've learned to really protect my energy. Those who dismiss what I've experienced or don't really believe me, I don't need them, honestly, in my life. And I was fortunate. I think I figured that out pretty early on, but that doesn't mean it still happens to me today. So I think protecting my energy is one of the biggest things, and one of the ways that I try to navigate and protect myself living with a chronic condition like hypermobile EDS.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So how has EDS impacted your daily life?
Many ways. I honestly have had to restructure my life, and I was someone who always liked to go and do things and run, and I had a ton of different hobbies, and I've had to strip all of that back. And my advice to anyone that's experiencing that would be, sometimes you're forced to strip everything back immediately because of a very bad flare-up you have, or an incident that you have. But sometimes you also have to do it over a period of time. It's a balance always between the physical and the mental, because mentally it is taxing to have to abandon things that you love. And so for me, I used to volunteer at this one riding center where you worked with horses, and I really can't do that anymore. The horses are hard for someone where their joints shift out of place and things like that. So I think for me, getting to a point where I recognize that I have to change my lifestyle and find new hobbies and things that I still love that support my body. And I've gotten to a really good place with that. And something like this, even talking with you guys today, I mean, this is something I find joy in. So finding whatever it is that speaks to you and going for that, because due to the nature of these conditions, sometimes we have to shift our lifestyle a bit.
Yeah, I understand that. So this is a question I added. So, like, what do you wish more people understood about EDS from a patient's perspective, which is kind of just like the whole entire reason, like, we had this interview. We wanted to, like, get a patient's perspective on it.
I would say this is such a, I don't want to use like a just a hot term right now, but gaslighting is really what it is. It's hard that people not only live with this physically, but then the constant need that you have to prove yourself to others. You have to, and this is really across all chronic conditions, there's this need, especially with invisible illness, to have to feel that you have to prove things. And there are even times where I've canceled, plans with people, but then the next day I feel good and I can do something. And there's this odd sense of guilt. Like, should I have canceled yesterday? Was I really not well enough? Like, we live with that. And so whenever we surround ourselves, or we're just experienced or exposed to people, I should say, that don't necessarily believe everything we're saying, that's tough. So empathy and understanding is what we need from everyone who is blessed enough to not to have to live with a chronic condition.
Yeah, I understand that. We've also talked to other chronic people with chronic illnesses, and that's also a big challenge, is kind of just like proving yourself that you can't do this, or thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, it is a huge part.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what changes would you like to see in how doctors approach EDS awareness?
Yes, this is a great question. And so whenever I understood my diagnosis, one of the things I started working towards was understanding how to better support our bodies, because I've had a very difficult time being understood by providers. And since I had mentioned I was certified in yoga, which, as I mentioned, with hypermobile EDS, I wouldn't practice yoga. I would practice a form of it, which is one part to get into. But I also studied with the Ehlers-Danlos Society, their ECHO program under the integral movement method with Jeannie Dubon, who is a wonderful resource for our community, if anyone is not familiar with her. But all of these resources and all of these individuals like Jeannie, who understand and support our community, understand that each case is different. And that is true across many chronic illnesses, but hypermobile EDS and EDS in general, it's especially true. Symptoms will come and go. It's not always the same, and things can shift and move out of place. You can have a good day or a bad day with POTS. You could have a mast cell flare-up that's completely gone. There are things that you can test for, like tryptase, and that's a marker, mast cell mediator, to see if you have mast cell activation syndrome. Unless you are tested right at the exact time for that tryptase level, it will come back normal, and you could be diagnosed, go being undiagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. And so in studying these movement methods and in trying to better understand these conditions, providers also need to understand that we are all different. We all are going to have good days and bad days. And whenever we have those days, we don't know what kind of day we're going to have when we enter your office, right? So I would love to go to the doctor when I'm having a terrible day, because I feel like it's easier to believe me, right? Yeah. But that's just not how things work. Awareness is one of the biggest pieces in this, and why I'm out there trying to raise my voice on social media, why you're doing what you're doing. And so many people just are unaware, and fibromyalgia is a big piece of this. For me, it has been a Band-Aid diagnosis for a long time, and many women are gaining that diagnosis of fibro, and it's on their chart, and no providers are looking further. So to anyone watching this, to any providers that are watching this, if an individual comes in with that diagnosis and is experiencing symptoms outside of that fibro realm, I would encourage everyone to look further. I really would.
We had a few of our EDS patients not be able to attend a meeting today because they said they're having a bad flare-up day. I know you can't speak for everybody that has EDS, but what does a flare-up look like for you?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and I'm just running through all the different scenarios in my head and trying to pick the best one. Sometimes a flare-up day means that I will be at home, maybe in bed with a heating pad. It could be more of like a physical sensation when my body is just sore and it doesn't have much to give. I find for me, movement is so important, and that's why I spend so much time trying to understand movement and learn and teach it for hypermobile bodies. But for me, I could work out and by workout, I don't like to say that word because I feel like exercise can be triggering. So I like to say movement or move. But I could practice movement for probably 3 months consecutively, 4 days a week. And if I go 2 weeks without moving and practicing those movement techniques, my body will collapse basically. And for me, in the fall of this past year, 2025, I became anemic and I had to go and have iron infusions, and I wasn't able to continue my movement practices. And coming out of that, my body couldn't support itself. And even though my iron was restored, because I'm so hypermobile, I did not have the muscle strength, the stability in the rest of my body. So it just meant complete physical exhaustion, and I had to work to rebuild that. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that we have to stay on top of because we can decondition so quickly.
Right.
So sometimes it's physical, sometimes it could just be complete fatigue mentally, and exhaustion, brain fog. That's a huge one, which is incredibly difficult today. I feel like I'm pretty articulate and I'm able to speak to this, but there absolutely are days where the brain fog does creep up on you and you wish you could be your best self, but that day you just have to give yourself some grace, and allow yourself to accept those moments where you're not your best. And I heard this once from my yoga teacher training, but you can't pour from an empty cup, and that's so true. You have to give yourself some love, rest, and try to give yourself some grace and feel better. So physical, mental, those are two large pieces, but it varies so drastically because it could not just be physical fatigue, but there could be something that is incredibly specific. I have a lot of issues with my neck and my throat, and sometimes the pressure, when my neck is not in the proper alignment, I'll have pressure behind my eyes, which turns into this deep head fog and head pain. And so that alone could change my day. So sometimes it's not an all over body sensation that's a flare up. Sometimes it's a small little trigger that changes how your body is in alignment and can change your day.
All right. This question wasn't really on the script thing that I sent you, but I had someone reach out to me and my organization the other day, and they were asking about an EDS diagnosis. They were saying, oh yeah, I believe I have EDS based off all the information that we've researched and what we have on our research blog. So do you have any words of advice for anyone who's exploring that as a possibility?
I do. And I get a lot of questions about this, and it's something that I do love to talk about because I have a lot of different ideas around it. The first would be document. Any symptom you have, write it down. I have gone so far as to the point where I have a document that I have organized, and I will print out and I will take it to the provider. I have one for myself and I have one for the provider, and we go through it line for line. The reason that I have found this is the best way, at least that I've found, and if there's something else out there, I'd love to know about it. This is what I found to be the best way, because many times appointments can get derailed and you cannot get through all of the information that you want to get through, or you leave the appointment and you forget something. So one, I would document everything, write down your symptoms, and make sure that provider gives you the time to walk through everything together. And it also allows you to clearly communicate everything. And to anyone watching this, especially if you are younger and you're just starting your journey with this, it can be overwhelming and intimidating to talk to some of these providers, but it's important for us to remember we are paying for a service and they should be helping us. Sometimes it feels like it's this interview process where you're trying to get your point across. It shouldn't feel like that way, but I know it does. And so in having those documents, it's really helpful to advocate for yourself that way. Photos, huge. If you have any kind of rashes, any kind of dislocations, bruising, anything that you could photograph to showcase your symptoms would be very helpful. Family history is another huge one. Even if someone doesn't have the diagnosis, if they have similar symptoms, that was a huge way that I and my family, because it is hereditary, were able to gain our diagnosis. We went to things together. And so I was maybe more hypermobile than someone else. And because of that and seeing that connection, since it is genetic, it can really help. I talk to a lot of mother-daughter duos that are going through this journey together.
Right.
Yeah. So is there anything else you would like to share?
Oh my goodness. So many things.
Yeah.
But one thing that I would like to say that is probably not as well known about EDS and is really important to understand is that we can, while there isn't a cure, there are things we can do to support our bodies. And I've gone to physical therapy before, and went for 9 sessions. I walked out much worse from physical therapy than whenever I entered. And so I understand that it's scary to try to seek help in that capacity. However, it is so important for the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos population to build stability in their body, and that's through very gentle movement. And that's, once again, talking about the integral movement method. That's incredibly helpful. Other methods of movement, like I had said, a limited range of movement within yoga, Tai Chi, there are certain movements we can do. I've found that flowing motion instead of repetitions is much better for our community. With repetitions, things are more likely to flare, pop out of place. If you are more comfortable with kind of like moving and flowing with your body, not in a super noodly way, which is what I originally did, but in more of a controlled movement, it's very helpful. So like, for example, if I were to raise my arm and I'm hypermobile, my natural instinct is I just kind of like raise it and my arm flops. And I initiate the movement more so with my hand. What we should be doing is initiating that movement more so with our shoulder. So everything closer to the core of the body. That will build stability in the body. So next time I raise my arm, I try to focus on intentionally raising my arm from more of my shoulder. So there's a lot of different ways we can move and support our bodies. That's a huge piece of this. Proprioception is another huge concept that I was not familiar with until I gained this diagnosis and started working with the body more. But people with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome lack basically this natural proprioception, which is your ability to tell where your body is in space and time. And so we may be more clumsy. We may knock things over, not have as good of balance. These are all things that I've experienced my entire life. And the interesting thing is proprioception is a skill that you can learn. That is something we can actually build and work with. And so from moving in very simple ways, like balancing on one foot only for a couple minutes a day, things like that. And by a couple minutes a day, I mean like 30 seconds in the morning, maybe try 30 seconds later. I've been able to train that in my body, and I'm less clumsy than I used to be. So there are things that we can do to support our bodies. And one other large piece in understanding and gaining this diagnosis is there are things that we should avoid. There are certain medications that we should avoid that are more likely to work against our connective tissue, things like fluoroquinolines. That's one type of medication that our community is generally advised to stay away from. And this isn't medical advice. I can't offer medical advice, but this is education that is out there and available for people to explore. And so while there isn't a cure, and I've heard this from providers myself before, there's not a cure. Why are you, what do you want from me? There are things that we can do to help our bodies, and we deserve to have answers, because whenever we go to have a procedure and the surgeon is positioning our bodies have a wider range of movement, so we should be supported more whenever we're headed into procedures, and use things like butterfly needles in our veins. Like there is a list of things, and I just want people to understand that while there isn't a cure, there are things we can do to help ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
And, just thank you so much for agreeing to do a meeting with us. Our goal is to, educate, students about rare diseases who are interested in researching them and just advocating for them. We're working with Care for Rare. We're also trying to partner with NORD as well. Just trying to raise awareness for diseases like yours to just get a better understanding. We actually just reached 1,000 volunteers yesterday who have been interested in researching rare diseases, and we almost have 200 flyers about EDS around our community. Just spreading awareness about that. And it's really important that we get a perspective from a patient that can just give us more valuable insight on that. So just thank you so much for everything.
I don't know if you can see, but I do have goosebumps from from what you said. It is so incredible that you're doing this. It really is, and I mean that. And it's very admirable, and for you to want to spend your time this way, you're helping people, and people need the help. So thank you for what you
All right. We'd like to thank our guest once again for taking the time out of their day to share their story with us. Hearing directly from people living with these conditions is one of the best ways to build understanding and awareness.
We hope this interview helped you learn more about Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and give you a better understanding of the challenges, resilience, and experiences of those living with it.
If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. It really helps us reach more people.
If there are any conditions or topics you would like us to cover in the future, let us know in the comments down below.
Thank you so much for watching.
See you in the next video.